Well, an appeal to this very wide-ranging, surprising judgment today, of course possible, but it does represent a delay, at least an obstacle to government's nuclear ambitions. Eskom was hoping to send out a request for proposals from nuclear suppliers as early as this year. Let's discuss further. We're joined by Professor of Physics Winkler from the University of Johannesburg. Thank you for being with us, Prof. Yeah. Do you welcome this? I think you've written quite extensively opposing a huge nuclear deal.
Yes, I think the way the whole process started was problematic, and I think that's come out clearly today. If one wants to engage in an exercise like this, especially one which has got such significant consequences in terms of money, in terms of the whole energy plan for the next 30 years or so, one really needs to be careful that it's all done procedurally according to the law and properly. And I think step one was to actually convince the country that this is actually needed, and then to actually follow everything step by step, and this clearly wasn't done yet.
So we're not saying nuclear, well, you're not saying nuclear is bad, you're talking more about how we get to decide how much nuclear we need, etc.
Yes, that was what the court case today was about. I think in general, and this might now be one of the outcomes of this, is that the whole energy plan is constantly being upgraded, and I think the latest drafts of the energy plan don't require nuclear for the next 20 years or so. So I think that if this doesn't exclude nuclear for the future, it just means that if one wants to introduce it, one needs to follow a certain process. And so I'm expecting that, I'm expecting some sort of appeal anyway, because a lot of people have invested and are relying on this.
A lot of political will for nuclear to go through.
That's right.
Where do you stand? How much nuclear energy does South Africa need? Do you think we have enough, or do we need a whole lot more? Or
for right now, we're fine. We're fine for the next 20 years or so. Bear in mind, we still have.
So you think we shouldn't even look at any new plans right now?
No, not for another 10 years or so. Given that the latest draft electricity plan for the country said that we will only, if at all, need nuclear power in 2037, that gives us a lot of time. And I think right now what should be the priority is finishing Medupi and Kusile coal power stations, which have been running over time and have been running over budget. I think that needs to happen first. I think we also need to make sure this renewable energy program doesn't go off the rails, which Eskom has threatened to do, because they haven't been promoting or signing the latest batch of contracts, and that has a potential of, well, not killing the industry, but certainly hammering it quite badly. So I think we should be continue on the track we are on right now with regards to renewables. We're certainly not short of energy. That's been one of the reasons why there's been a little bit of trouble in Mpumalanga in the coal mining regions, because Eskom is basically saying we don't need all the coal that you can supply us. So right now, for the next few years, we actually have too much electricity available right now, although of course that's going to change a couple of years from now.
Should that make people smell a rat in itself? If we want 9,600 kilowatts of nuclear power, are you saying even that figure is not justified?
All right, that figure came up about 7 years ago. And I think at the time, certainly, there was a certain projection about how electricity demand is going to be rising until 2030. And at that stage, it was also a time when solar energy in particular was a lot more expensive than it is now. At that stage, it probably was warranted to at least look at it. But the situation has changed such a lot now. Solar energy and wind energy have now become much more feasible than they ever were before, and especially the first few of these power stations that have been established here have been extremely successful in this regard.
It sounds like you agree with people who are saying if we just wait, renewable energy is coming down in cost. It's becoming so much more effective that if we relook at our nuclear plans in 10 years, say, we'll say no, let's rather go for renewables, which is green.
I think that's likely to happen. All right, we don't know certainly the long-term plan is to shut down all coal power stations 50 years from now or so. And at that stage, well, we'll have to see how exactly we're going to deal with our energy. But we don't know what the world will look like. In 30 years' time, in 50 years' time, we might be living in a world which is much less energy intensive than what we're dealing with right now. So we might also find that different forms of energy are being developed and are proving feasible. So I think right now it's certainly not a good idea to invest a huge amount of funding in nuclear. And so for that reason, I also don't think that the pressure we've had that we should now immediately move into nuclear, that this is going to hold up. I think we'll revisit the situation a few years down the line. All right, we will still hear a lot of noises now. There could very well be an appeal, but I don't think we're going to.
In finality, you've put the cost in perspective in your analysis. Most people saying R1 trillion. We really don't know. Some saying much less. Eskom certainly saying much less. Some up to 3 trillion. But just put this in perspective. The cost.
Yes. Well, considering that the annual South African government budget is of the order of R1 trillion, I think the Receiver of Revenue recently said that that's what they collected, that's a tax base they collected for the year. So that's what it is. So it's almost as though this country needs to use up 1 year's of total tax collection
for 50 million people.
That's right, yeah. And it's also, if it's done, it's the possibility that this might have to be financed through some sort of loans, and these then also come with interest. So it might very well be more than that. So it's just too much of a risk to move into something like this unless it's absolutely necessary. And I think that's what the courts also implied, that there needs to be a public participation process, but there's a need to actually convince Parliament, to convince the country that this is something which is needed. And before one moves ahead. And I think in that respect, I don't think this judgment only affects nuclear. I think it might affect the way the country deals with any projects on a major scale.
Supporting Parliament and public participation. Yes. Thank you so much for your analysis. And certainly this would dwarf the arms deal that was so controversial. That was Professor Hartmut Winkler from the University of Johannesburg.